Hey guys, how are you? It's Ashley. Hey, listen, I am going to jump into some data that I think will be very helpful for us right now. And it's a question we get all the time, which is how's the market? So I'm going to take a deep dive here and break those numbers down for you. I'm going to go fast because I want to keep the video as short as I can. I know people don't like to watch long videos. This data, so that you know, is updated as of essentially last week, the end of August. So jumping in, one of the things that I wanted to just remind all of ourselves is that, in the Econ 101 world, homes sell based on supply and demand, just like all other goods. And I think it's easy for us to forget that sometimes, where we put a lot of emphasis on the location, the bedroom bath count, the condition of the unit, and other factors, proximity to train stations and conveniences. All of those factors, of course, matter. However, at the end of the day, when we zoom out, homes still trade based on supply and demand like everything else does. The other thing I want to quickly touch on is the idea of a good market or a bad market. Actually, that's a little bit of sort of misnomer. The more sort of informed approach to that would say, are we in a buyer's market or a seller's market? Rarely is our real estate market ever in total balance. But we'll talk about that a little bit later in this video, and I'll go over that, exactly what that means statistically. And ultimately, I just want to continue to bring, local real estate economics to you and be your economist of choice as it relates to real estate. And so these are the kind of numbers that we look at on an ongoing basis. And I haven't done a video exactly like this in a little bit, and I thought it was going to be helpful to illustrate. So let's dive in. So want to start quickly with kind of a 10-year look back, and I'm not going to dwell too much on this. However, do want to cover, the important parts, which is this giant trough here is the Great Recession that we had. And the main message coming out of that is that we've been on this up and to the right for median sales prices. So we're looking at the median sales prices in the marketplace, and this is City of Chicago wide for all single-family residential, that single-family houses, condos, and townhomes. So it's been a very strong recovery pricing, I'll call it, from the market that we had that ended in basically 2008. Sort of over here off the chart was probably the actual peak in late 7 or 2008. So we have recovered. We've been on a run here for about 7 years, which is important to know. This is a 10-year look back that I just gave you, and I'm also going to now zoom in a little bit and look at the 3-year median price appreciation graph. And so same trend, so it's just zoomed in a little bit more on the same data. Up and to the right, it's about a 10% increase here from 2016 to now. So somewhere around the 3 to 3.5%. If we averaged those last 3 years in terms of price appreciation, which is certainly positive and healthy. And the one thing that we're going to look at here is, as we look at the graph and we zoom into the 1 year, we're now starting to see a flattening of the sales prices, the median sales price. This started back in about September of 2018 and goes through August of this year. So this is current to the month data. Again, so what we're starting to see after a very long seller's market, sustained seller's market, is the prices are starting to flatten. And interestingly here, this little dip is in essentially February, March, and April of 2019. So this was our spring market. So that's not a trend we would normally expect to see. A decrease in average or median sales price in the middle of our spring market, because it's one of our strongest times of the year. I don't think it's necessarily indicative of anything specific, other than it's a sign of a market in transition, a market that's starting to cool off and go in a different direction, is why I think you would get something like an anomaly in what would otherwise be normally a busy time of year. So just pointing out here, prices have been going flat now for about 10, 11 months, and we need to keep our eye on that trend. So buyer's market and seller's market, I touched on that. That's really the best way to describe a market instead of good market or bad market. And the National Association of Realtors has defined that as 6 months of supply of inventory. And this is the graph for that. And so if I draw the line at the 6-month point, we're going to see, so everything over here was a buyer's market because it was above 6 months of inventory. Everything over here crossed over in 2013, and everything over here for the last 6 years has been a seller's market, and that's where we still reside. We're still hovering around 4 months of inventory, which for a seller is typically a statistically good number to be at. So just wanted to explain that and how it works. We're starting, so then I want to transition to the next stat, which is the closed sales. This, I think, is a little bit telling as to what we're going to be looking at moving forward. Is this is the 10-year look back, and so in and of itself isn't super helpful. Again, when the market was a buyer's market, we saw less units sell. When the market is stronger, we see more units sell, so that's a trend that would be pretty predictable over the 10-year time horizon. We zoom into the same data on 3 years, and what we're starting to see is a down and to the right trend line. And we see it peaked in one of two places, either in early 2017 or late 2018, maybe right at like January of 2018. So for the last, let's call it, 18 months, we have seen the number of closed transactions starting to go down in the city of Chicago. All right. So here's the same graph zoomed in at a 1-year number so you can kind of get a sense of it. So this is about 28,600 closings down to now about 28,000, let's call it 400. So we're down about 2,000 closed residential units since early 2018. I would say that is not a dramatic shift. I would say it's been very subtle, and a lot of home sellers, home buyers, even real estate agents wouldn't have necessarily known that that was happening if they're not looking at the data. They probably knew that it felt different, but they wouldn't have necessarily been able to quantify what's going on. So while it is trending that direction, I do think that it's been a subtle shift so far. And when we look at those two things together, I just mentioned that the number of units have started to gradually go down, and we're seeing the result is a flattening of median sales price. These are two things that when you look at supply and demand, I think would be logical and would be the number of closed sales going down would be what we call a leading indicator, and then the pricing would be a lagging indicator that this would have come after some period of time. And we saw the time in between to be about 10 months, okay? About 10 months lag from here to here. So I share all this data so that we can have an understanding of what's going on in the marketplace and that we can keep our eye on it as we look forward. Obviously, we don't know what the next 6 to 12 months is going to bring. We only know what the historical data is right now. Here's my take on it. Overall, the fundamentals are strong. So fundamentally, we have a strong economy. We have relatively almost virtually low to no unemployment. We have extremely low interest rates. There aren't any major shocks to the financial system right now that are causing these outside forces. Much different from the big residential recession that we had back in 2007, 8, and through 2012 was very much set up by the lending market. That the residential mortgages were the primary cause of that whole crash. However, it is fair for us to note that the trend line is that the number of sales is down, and which is causing our prices to remain flat right now. That's what's happening. Over time, a continued decline could eventually lower prices, right? That also seems logical that over time that will happen. We haven't seen actual statistical evidence of that yet. However, that could be where we're headed. And it's equally fair to say it could go flat for many more months in a row, and it could even come back up. So we're just keeping an eye on all the data that we have at our disposal. So for buyers who are out in the marketplace, Our belief is you proceed with normal caution. You're going to have caution anyway when you're buying anything. You're going to obviously continue to do your due diligence. One of the big benefits right now is interest rates are extremely low. They had gone up at the end of last year and they've come back down, and that's a huge benefit. And it's always the right time to buy the right property. So for buyers who are out there, again, the reasons why it makes sense to continue forward with buying the right property is, again, low unemployment, right? And low interest rates, and the fact that it's still always better than, if we do a not equal sign, always better than renting. Owning, 9 times out of 10 is going to be better than renting. So if you have questions on that side of the transaction, we can certainly help. For sellers, here's our thinking right now. Because the data is unclear exactly where we're headed with pricing, we do know that we're at or near the end of this current 7-year run that we've been on, and that prices are probably at their peak for this recovery coming out of the Great Recession that we had. So if you're considering selling now or in the next probably even up to 2 years, we should be having a conversation about what does it look like to make sure it matches up to your goals. If you plan to stay in the home you're in or the property that you own for probably 5 years or longer, it's probably a case of do nothing and just stay the course, because the market will have done probably a couple of other moves by then. But we always encourage people to think in 3 to 5 year increments instead of 1 year when it comes to residential real estate, just so you're not leaving any stones unturned. We're happy to talk more about it in specific detail, but wanted to share this data so that you had it, and we'll see you real soon on a video down the road.